Nice to meet you. My name is Beth Speaker Christensen. I'm a speech-language pathologist working in the Chicagoland area, in the area of augmentative and alternate communication. I have worked in schools, hospitals, clinics, and all of the above, nursing homes, you name it. And I'm currently running a private practice out of Brookfield, Illinois. This is my friend, Saird Bass.
Hello, I'm Saird Bass. I am also a speech pathologist and specialize in alternative and augmentative communication. There's all of our information right there. Just as a disclosure, we both have different places that we frequent, such as the Rehab Engineering Society of North America, as well as ASHA SIG 14, which represents AAC, SIG 12, oops. And then Beth is also a member of USAC, which is the United States
Society of Augmentative Communication, which is a chapter of ISAC, which is our international society.
Okay, so for today, we have a few goals that we want to go through. First, we want everyone in the room to be able to receive information on how alternative and augmentative communication devices are laid out and organized, as well as different ways that they can be accessed. Then we want to go through and talk a little bit about feature matching, which is making sure that we are fitting the individual to whatever device they might be using. We want to talk about voices on AAC devices because that is very important in terms of being an individual and getting the communication that you want. And then finally talking a little bit about AAC funding because we know that that can be very difficult, especially to get that first device.
So we often take a survey of the room to find out if we're working with families, with researchers, with therapists or users. Would you like to tell us what group you guys are with? Are you family members of someone with leukodystrophy? Okay, your son. And for you, Miss? Okay, so we've got family members represented, and we know you have family members as well. So it doesn't matter. The whole purpose of well, it matters. Everyone matters. I didn't mean to say that. What I wanted to say is that we like to gear this presentation towards those that don't do our job. We went to school to study language and technology and to put it all together so that we can provide a service to the individuals who need communication aids. But we want to bring this talk back to a level that you can understand so that you can feature match for your people, your children and family members that may need some of this technology at some point.
So we'll begin about talking about the process of how a device is obtained. Usually it starts with, we see the potential. Somebody is having difficulty communicating, and that can mean either it's someone who is completely nonverbal, they might be communicating through other means, or it could be somebody who is able to speak orally and has difficulty maintaining longer conversations, longer utterances, and so they might need that AAC. But regardless of whether somebody is verbal or not, it is seeing that potential. As humans, we do have a desire to communicate. That moves into the evaluation, which we always say is a team effort. It's never just one person walking in. It's not Beth walking in or me walking in and saying, now we bestow upon you the AAC. It takes a multidisciplinary approach of PTs, OTs, teachers, and especially the family and the user to make sure that we get the right fit. Then after a device is obtained, we move into training and intervention, which is almost an entire journey in itself.
Absolutely. So what you'll see, as we said before, is multidisciplinary is best. We want to make sure that we have all of the players who are providing their expertise, and OT is going to know best what the access method might be in order for the person to get to the technology. If they can't hit the button or isolate a point, we're going to find another way to do that. The family member is always the expert when it comes to their person, and so it makes no sense for me to walk into an evaluation, meet someone for the first time, and believe that I'm the expert. We're going to look into what someone can see, hear, or perceive. From the last slide, the thing that's most important is in order for someone to qualify for communication aids, The only requirement we have is that they're breathing. So it doesn't matter if they have cause effect. It doesn't matter if they already know what pictures mean or something. Anybody who needs a communication system, we will find something that works to some degree as long as they're breathing. And so when we talk about access, how is their fine motor control? Have they lost the strength to lift their arm against gravity? Should we look for an alternate method of access? How's their gross motor for positioning? Are they able to sit up tall? Do they need to have extra laterals in their wheelchair in order to keep them in a position where they can use their arms better or that they can access a switch? So once you've considered some of these factors, we look at 4 different domains where we write goals, and that would be an operational domain where we decide whether or not we can turn it on or turn the volume up or actually hit a button. The linguistic domain, what kind of language are we looking for? We have to be able to request or direct an activity, comment, hey, that's cool, ask a question, where are my shoes, or I have to go to the bathroom, or where is the bathroom for that matter. And then there's the social domain of how am I going to use this language to communicate with my family and my friends and my teachers, and strategic, what happens if something doesn't go perfectly right? How are we going to fix the problem if we're having a communication problem?
So when speech therapists start looking at what we do with that linguistic component, there are a lot of things that go into that. We look at Bloom's taxonomy, how sentences are structured, how a student is developing language. Sometimes we have students using AAC who have completely typical underlying language. They just aren't able to verbalize so that others understand. The other side is we might have a student who has an underlying language disorder but is also nonverbal. Usually when we see students with acquired needs as far as AAC, there is completely typical underlying language. So it's understanding what kind of words need to be in that system. And this is a huge list of what goes into that. We want to make sure that students have the ability to create SNUG, spontaneous novel utterance generation, as well as Lewis.
They need to be able to say what they want to say, where they want to say it, to whom they want to say it, wherever they may be. So in order to do that, we use all of this jargon and mishmash that we learned in speech therapy school in order to help us make decisions so that we find the best fit. Again, we're going back to fitting the device to the needs of the client. And you don't need all those big crazy words that are on the right. We're going to keep it simple.
So there are many choices when it comes to communication devices. Sometimes if you go to a certain rehab center, they might say, okay, this is the device that we recommend. But there are so many that can be considered, and they all have their different reasons that they might fit with an individual. Some of them that we have up here, we have a NovaChat, we have an Accent, we have a Tobii Dynavox device, we have an app-based system. I think this one is
that one Proloquo?
That one is Proloquo. We have
Speak for Yourself.
Speak for Yourself.
They're all different. There's 1,000 to choose from. But these are just a few of the samples of the things that you might see when we're talking about communication aids.
And there are even more choices. It doesn't necessarily have to be something high-tech that plugs in. It doesn't necessarily have to be a dynamic display. When we talked about strategic domains, it might be that all of a sudden your device is not charged, or maybe it's raining outside, or you're in the pool. So having alternative methods for either access or to communicate are still important. We have everything from, like, we might have a medical board, a pain chart that might be used in a hospital setting. We have single button communication switches, which are great, like to keep next to a bed so someone can get attention to say, hey, come help me. Or,
Mom, I need you.
Right. It's a great way to just have that available very quickly.
Like a nurse call button.
Yeah, except doesn't go beep, beep, beep. It just kind of gives you that voice.
Correct.
Absolutely.
You can also use Alexa to drop into another room, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. Lots of fun technology. We have e-tran boards where someone can use their eyes to demonstrate what they're looking at. Tactile communication for students who or individuals who might have difficulty with vision.
There's an actual key here. So they would feel that and know that that's what maybe this means we're going to get in the car.
so you can make those tactile representations of words. And then one of my favorites up in the upper corner, the TV show Speechless. I don't know if anyone here has seen it. It's a little older now than when we first started talking about AAC, but it took an individual who used AAC to communicate, but his preferred method was a low-tech board and then a laser pointer connected to his eyeglasses, so he could look at what he was wanting to on the board, and a partner could assist in saying what those words were so that everybody else in the room could understand. This is one of my favorite words in speech pathology, and I get to say it. The zone of proximal development. Whenever I'm looking at AAC, I want to think, where are a student's current skills and what is kind of that next half step up? Think about it when you're climbing a ladder. If we took one of those rungs out of there, it's not going to be safe. And I always say nobody ever really gets hurt in speech therapy.
Not usually.
But we want to make sure that it is something that is within a student's grasp, within their area of proximal development.
And that's true for everyone. I work with adults as well, and occasionally you'll find that in starting with a brand new system, we might recommend, these words or this device or whatever. They've already got language, so we have to start with where they're at and build their communication from there.
And we always say when you have a device, yes, a lot of these devices are programmable. Yes, a lot of these devices you can change the language, but just a professional ask from those of us who work with AAC is make sure that it's not a one-person decision when you're changing language on a device, because those words were very researched to be put where they are, and there are places in a device that are really great for customization. So whether it's even if it's just the SLP, I always want to check in with the team before we make any changes to the device. And also remembering there can be a significant learning curve, especially if someone has a condition where they might fatigue easily or might start off really powerful and then have a little more difficulty with access. There are even some people who have different access methods depending on how their body is performing on that day. So that learning curve can be difficult for not only finding one system of access, but also a second one. So we have to think what is going on now and also plan for what communication needs might be coming in the future. And then the last thing I always bring up is how long does it take before an infant speaks? You come home from the hospital, itty bitty baby, you're not expecting the child to say, please, mom, may I have some more? It's going to take some time for that language to develop. So when a new communication device is put in front of someone, we do need to give them that time as well.
So this is a meme that goes around our community quite often, that it takes an average 18-month-old. They've been exposed to over 4,000 hours of language before they're expected to speak. For those who are using communication aids, what you'll find is we don't give them that same affordability, with that same offering. If we are going to speech therapy and practicing with our technology for 30 minutes twice a week, or in school they have those little IEP minutes or whatever, whatever it may be, if we're only practicing that little bit of time, this meme says it would take about 84 years to have the same exposure to language. And so when we think about neuromuscular differences and the challenges that come along with communication, we have to make sure that we're practicing a lot when we can, when we're strong, when we're feeling it. And when we're not, we have to have other ways of doing it. So, it may be that the person had language or was talking before, and along with their progression of their disease, we have to find this new language for them to learn. But we're going to pair them together so that they have the best possible outcomes.
And sometimes with these devices, I know I used to work in a clinic where I'd have a student with one language system. They were using LAMP on an iPad. And then in the next session, I'd have a student with Touch Chat. And so it was almost like switching between two languages. And even as a typical language learner who is verbal, it was hard for me to go between those two. But once I got into the groove, it was a little bit easier. So it does take time to get used to these systems.
So with this slide, we want to emphasize that, whether you're having a good day or a bad day, whether you're familiar or working with a familiar or unfamiliar listener, there's things that our partners, our communication friends are going to want to say to mom and dad that they're not going to want to say to the doctor. And so it's not that they don't have the ability to do it, but in that moment, it makes it more difficult. We definitely want to take the path of least resistance. We want to make communication as effortless as possible, because the more work that it takes to get to those words, if it's a huge challenge and I only have so much energy in my battery for the day, it may not get the attention that we would want it to. We want to make sure that we get to phrases and immediate communication, the stuff that's most important and most motivating. If asking for my favorite TV show is high on the list, that button better be easy to get to. So our friend Bruce Baker, he passed away during COVID. He created a system a long time ago that a lot of what we use is based on. So we're not going to get into all the nuts and bolts of that. But the main thing that he pointed out was this motivation ratio. If motivation is high and the physical effort or the cognitive effort, the linguistic effort, like what words you need or the time it takes to get your message out is also very high, that ratio is going to be off. It's going to be way too difficult to get the message out. So if motivation isn't high enough to combat the other things. If motivation is high because I really, 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 really want to sit with daddy during dinner and I really want to tell him that, it doesn't matter how difficult it is or where the words are. If it's highly motivating, we're going to get lots of success because the motivation takes over. They say that it takes hundreds of times practicing something to learn a new skill, unless it's done with play and motivation, in which case it takes 12 to 15 times to learn a new skill. So as long as it's fun and playful and motivating, it takes a lot less time to learn that new skill.
Yes, and I love that too, because the motivation is a huge factor. And sometimes people will say, my child or my student or the individual I'm working with isn't using their AAC device. And it's like, well, are you asking them something they want to answer?
Yeah, don't ask them during math class.
Right. We get on to next, what we call the real estate. So we have some things up here. We have some low-tech core boards. We have some devices. What we talk about with real estate is how much space we have on that board to put different pictures. So that real estate of how much space we have to work with or what size the pictures can be are determined by a student's visual skills, their physical access, cognitive and language functions, and that tells us how many items we can have. We also, when we get into electronic devices, can do something called dynamic display, where we might have 15 words. I think I was just seeing what you pulled up there, or 28 words, but you can hit a button and go to another screen with 28 more words. So there are ways that we can take that real estate to figure out how many words we can get for a person to be able to access. And something very important is when we think about that real estate and what words are the most motivating and what words are used the most frequently, often it comes down to core words. Now, this is evidence of the first 50 words that most people learn. Well, there are different lists, first 10, first 50, first 200. And it goes by the principle of when we speak about things, we're using a lot of verbs, we're using a lot of adjectives, we're using a lot of descriptors. We're not necessarily talking in nouns. So Beth and I have a little shtick where it's just chair,
Table,
carpet, chandelier,
phone,
window, glasses,
door, hat.
So that makes... We're not saying anything. It's just we're labeling things around us.
We need the glue to put our words together, and that's the pronouns, the adjectives, the verbs. We need all of that stuff to stick our nouns together so we've said something important.
So when we're looking at communication systems, we definitely want somebody to be able to say, I'm thirsty, or I'm hungry, or I want some milk, or I want some soda, whatever you're getting a hold of. But in that real estate, we want to make sure that we're giving them those words, those core words to hold everything together. Okay. And so the navigating, we want to know how many levels, when we talk about those dynamic devices, can a student navigate through? Or how long can they wait on a scan? If they have auditory scanning where they're just accessing a switch, How long can they wait for that scan? How much can they keep in their mind as they're going through it? And then, of course, we think about the students' underlying language skills. And if they are a reader, there are some language systems where we can put words on the screen, where there are others where we can use pictures. I actually have a student I assessed who, on his own, started going through and deciding that when it came to the nouns, when it came to foods, he wanted actual pictures. He didn't want the drawing of bacon. He wanted bacon. And who's going to blame that kid?
Bacon is awesome.
Right. So he went through and he replaced a lot of the food items with pictures that are real. What Beth is holding up now, just to describe that, is a picture of a language system where there are just words that are put on the screen. And in my mind, in my preference, if I see the pictures are differentiated enough that for me, the pictures are a little bit easier. But for some, the words might be a better cue when they are learning.
And in order to use that, obviously, you'd have to have literacy skills. So it would have to be somebody who understands reading a little bit.
Takes us lovely into the language.
So with our picture representation in the systems, you can have real actual pictures of an orange. But what you'll find is it's difficult to have the exact picture of every exact thing. I was at a house just the other day, and the mom said, well, we need a real picture of an apple. And I said, okay, we're going to take a real picture of an apple that's in your fridge. What if you buy a green apple tomorrow? Do I have to change the picture? It's still an apple. So the real pictures don't always matter. Some people do, especially those who have memory loss or some memory differences, they may benefit from having a scene where they know what has to happen in the kitchen. They'll hit the microwave to say, can you warm up my food? So sometimes the actual image is something that helps with memory, and it helps to bring up the language that might be used in that setting.
There's also other representations of language, which I brought up earlier. We can have everything from line drawings. If you have a student in school, I'm sure you've seen some of these PCS symbols, symbol sticks, line drawings. And the actual interesting thing about all of this is all three of those symbols mean help. So
sure it does.
When we bring up language, how it might be represented in a system, we have to think that even though something might make a lot of sense to us, we have to think about how much sense that will make to everyone universally, which with verbs is pretty difficult.
How do you draw a picture? If we were playing Pictionary, how do you draw a picture of need or want or get? And these are words that we use quite often. So how would you draw that picture? So our argument here is that the pictures don't really matter. There's a multi-meaning system. My friend Bruce Baker, who again made that other motivation ratio, came up with a program called MinSpeak, Minimum Effort Speech. He used what are considered hieroglyphics to represent parts of language so that you could get to most words with just a couple of hits. Once you figure out the system behind this, you start to just talk. Kind of like when you type on a QWERTY keyboard, if you get really good at it, your fingers just kind of go. You don't have to think about where the letters are. My friends who use this system just talk. They know where those buttons are because they use those words over and over again.
And also looking at the symbols, this is just how they want to use the word want. I always find this amusing. It was one of the first MinSpeak symbols I was introduced to is that guy is looking at the poster of the man who's wanted, probably for committing some crime. They've recently changed this symbol to someone standing in front of a cookie jar because what happens with cookies? We want them.
We didn't really know why Fidel Castro was put into the devices, but Bruce actually called him Action Man. We worked at a school together a long time ago, and Sayre used to dress up in a green outfit and go into each room saying, today the word is go, 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 go. And then the other day she'd come in and she'd say, today the word is want, and she would act it out in her green suit. It was awesome.
I had a lot of energy at that time.
We're getting older.
But more beautiful. Like Beth said, how much do the pictures matter? This is another story from that school. We were going in and trying to show people, well, this picture is want and this picture is need. And going into the classrooms one day, we were talking to a teacher and we said, okay, this is what we're doing here. And one of the paraprofessionals said, I just don't get it. Why is the umbrella need? Why is money have?
Cookie cutters. Why are the cookie cutters make?
Why is that make? And one of our personal heroes, the teacher, Mrs. Alling, said, guys, the pictures don't matter. It could be a board full of pictures of drag queens.
Do you love them?
And
We love them.
As long as we taught the kids that Dame Edna was trouble and Robin Williams was silly, they would get it.
RuPaul is the drag queen I would want to be. So that's want.
Yeah, we put a lot of thought into this.
Sarah made this board. We're hoping to get this board around the world just to show that if the motivation is there, if I want to say want and I remember that it's that location on the bottom in the middle, it doesn't matter if it's RuPaul. It doesn't matter if it's the little boy with the cookie jar, and it doesn't matter if it's Fidel Castro looking at the wanted man on the wanted poster. The word want, if I want bacon with my breakfast, I'm going to find want.
So when you look at a device, you look at all these squares, and it can look quite overwhelming. There's a lot of squares there, and especially the first time you're looking at it, like I said, I like the pictures because it gives me a little bit of a clue of what I'm looking at. Another clue that we get on most devices is something called the Fitzgerald key, and this came from something a little bit earlier. And what it does is it takes parts of speech and associates them with colors. So we wondered why Fidel Castro, why the green hat? Because green usually represents verbs.
Green means go, green is action man. And so all of these hints that we're giving you when we talk about the pictures don't matter, when we talk about the color coding, it's not necessarily for our people who are using the devices, but it's more for us to help them. Oh, we need to start our sentence with a yellow word. Those are our pronouns. I want bacon. And so the Fitzgerald key is something to help us as communicative partners help our people to understand that we don't have to import every single photograph in our homes. When we're looking at communication systems, we can balance those pictures with some of these symbols that people use in a lot of the programs.
So when we think about core words and when we think about what we're saying, an exercise that we like to do is taking these three nouns. So the first noun, and I know we've got a few people in the room, what is that first picture there? A wheelchair. So I could put the word wheelchair in a device, but I could only use that when I was talking about that item of a wheelchair. So some words that we might use that could be used frequently in other situations are things like go.
Out, I want out of my wheelchair. We need to get in wheelchair.
Fast.
Sit.
Fast.
Slow. I drive slowly, otherwise I crash into door frames.
So some of those words are some things that we might use to put a little higher up in the device because they can be used in multiple situations. That second picture,
We all know it's Play-Doh, and we know it smells good, right? That brand new Play-Doh with the bright colors. But if we use real estate for the picture of Play-Doh, we can't talk about just I can ask for Play-Doh and then I'm done. But if I tell you I want blue, I want green, don't mix my colors together.
I just want to smell the Play-Doh.
Right? No Play-Doh. We need the word no. We need play. We need in, out. We need all those other words to talk about Play-Doh. So again, when we're talking about choosing the vocabulary that we want in however many buttons we're going to program or have in a system, we have to consider how we're going to talk about the thing. We use descriptive language in discussing Play-Doh. We might say, yellow cup, play, smell. And you might go, ha-ha. One of our Jedi masters in the world of AAC had an adult client who wanted a Taco Bell green dizzy drink.
Taco Bell green dizzy drink.
She had Taco Bell in there because they programmed in the restaurants. It turns out that this was an adult client that really wanted a margarita, but they hadn't put it in the device. So by using that description, we can talk about all kinds of things, right? I want the Taco Bell green dizzy drink.
I know, we get Taco Bell green dizzy drinks a lot.
Let's have Taco Bell green dizzy drinks tonight.
You all can join us. And that final picture there is a cookie. So as you've seen with what we've done with the other words, we might instead of saying cookie, if we are using a low-tech board, we might not have room for cookie, which would be sad, but it's true. But we could still say round. We could say eat. We could say not if somebody tries to hand you an oatmeal raisin cookie and you know they have chocolate chip ones.
You could say more. We could say share, right? So that all of the things that we need to talk about when we're talking about our nouns, we need to make sure that those are things that we incorporate into a communication aid.
So now we're getting into the access. I love this quotation. I try to put it in a lot of my presentations. The disability is not the problem. The accessibility is the problem. So it's not necessarily that someone has difficulty accessing something, it's that it hasn't been made accessible. So when we talk about AAC, there actually are many ways to access it. It's not all just, okay, I'm going to use my finger and point and it's going to talk. There are two main access methods, direct and indirect, and we'll go through both of those.
So direct access is when you go directly to your target. So if you're able to touch with your finger, or my friend Danny in the middle has a belt around his head that has a metal pole where we've attached his Apple Pencil. He touches his iPad and tells us what word he wants to say. He's in college. Those who use eye gaze, if you look directly at the button that you want to activate, that's direct access. So when you go right to your target, you have direct access. Now, the advantages are it's faster. You go right to the target and you can navigate through the buttons that you want and you touch the one you want and the screen moves to the next one. The disadvantages are that it takes a lot of focus and you can get tired real quick. If you have to use your arm and you don't have a lot of upper extremity strength and you have to reach for your iPad or your device and keep hitting these buttons over and over to make your sentences or your utterances, it's gonna you might fatigue.
And a lot of people think eye gaze, okay, it's a good solution, but I often encourage family members or other team members to sit down and try eye gaze, because after a few minutes you can feel, you probably never thought about your eyes being tired, but it's almost like if you choose to go to the gym, bless you, and do too many reps, I guess that's what they call them with the weights, your arms get tired and cramp up, your eyes can honestly get very tired as well.
Well, your focus can get tired. Our actual eye muscles don't fatigue, but the focus that is required, you get fatigue. There's another access method called, going back to direct, called the new point. If on this device right here, if I put a shiny dot on my forehead and I move my head, the mouse will move. So I can activate this device. It's what's called a new point, and I can use the face mouse on my iPad. So it's gonna triangulate my eyes and my nose and mouth, and as I move my face, it's gonna move the mouse around to activate the squares on my iPad. So that's direct access. Indirect access is when we have to navigate through choices or listen to a series of choices before we hit our target. So if we have to hit a switch and go through eat, drink, sleep, want, stop, go, then I find the one that I want and I have to hit a different switch, go. Oh, you want to go someplace, let's go, right? That's called indirect access. I'm scanning through a list of choices before I pick the target that I want. You might see that with using a joystick, with using a step-by-step communicator, which has a series of phrases that we can program about 2 minutes of language into there. The neuro node uses biofeedback, and the sip and puff is another switch that if you sip, it moves it one way, and if you puff, it chooses the one that you want, or vice versa.
And the advantage is that if you have a lot of motor involvement that's going to make it more difficult to do that direct selection, this can be a good choice to make sure that you are still getting control with your degree of movement. Disadvantages, it's slower. It takes a really patient communication partner. So sometimes if someone is using this, it's good to have a message at the beginning that says, give me a minute to say what I'm going to say, or something along those lines. So
this is my friend Chris. Sadly, his bird Pipsqueak that's on his head in this picture passed away this summer, or this spring rather. We always talk often about access and opportunity. Being able to use auditory input, visual input, tactile and scanning, all of these opportunities for access are needed in order to have success. So we have to match the access method. Just because it works for the adult or the other person in the room doesn't mean that it's going to be the way. Chris is the one who uses the shiny dot on his forehead in order to access his accent, which is a smaller one than this one here. He's also able to get to the internet, Facebook. He likes all sports, so he watches his sports games through the laptop in the computer.
I was surprised one day he friended me on Facebook, and it's just been all White Sox.
Yeah, he's a White Sox fan for
All the
sure.
time.
Don't ask him about the Cubs.
Don't. Seriously. I see you there.
So when we're also talking about getting that device into a spot where we can use it, depending on our mobility, depending on our access, depending on where we're talking or whatever, if we get tired sitting in our wheelchair, the wheelchair mount that we have with the device on it isn't going to do us much good if we're sitting in a papasan chair in the living room, or we're sitting on the couch, or we're in bed. So when we're talking about making sure our communication aids are nearby, we want to make sure that we have a mounting system that can then go to the person so that they can access it wherever they are. A lot of companies make what's called a floor stand, which has an extension arm that'll come out over something. I have one friend who is always in his papasan chair, so we float his device over his head, and he uses his shiny dot to make it go. He's never in his wheelchair, so I've never put his wheelchair mount on there. But when someone is in their chair, it's nice to have it readily available right in front of them. And so we have to consider how we're going to get our technology in front of our favorite people.
The next one, this is very important. We were talking just a little bit before people came in about being on a Zoom call with multiple AAC users who use the same voice.
All of my adult friends use the same voice.
Yes. There's a certain generation where there weren't many voices available, and so everybody kind of made the same choice if they were an adult male, and all of them now, that's their voice, so no one's going to change it. Yes, you are right on track. She was asking, how do we go through the process of voice banking? And that's exactly where we're going here. There are now high quality voices available on many systems. You can either find one, or if you know that you have some type of degenerative condition and that ability might be gone at some point, there are voice banking programs that you can use. Some of them are VoiceKeeper. Beth and I both have made VoiceKeeper voices. This is Beth's.
I like to go with you.
That's me. That's me. I recorded this one with about 200 sentences. You can record a voice with as few as 50 sentences, and the technology is getting really great in taking apart the sentences that they have you read and creating a voice that is uniquely yours. There are, John Costello out of Boston Children's, I think it is, has a program with ALS where they do a lot of voice banking. Vocal ID is a program I've also worked with where people can donate their voice and then they record the vocalizations of the person who's going to use the communication aid. And then what they do is they morph them together with fancy computer programs that are well beyond my understanding. And they can create a bespoke voice that would be a donated voice along with vocalizations or words that the person can say, and they create a voice. One of my friends, Elizabeth, bought one of those voices. She said it was a little creepy, though. It was a long time ago. She didn't love it. But the technology, especially with the growing of AI, is definitely improving, and those voices are sounding more and more like real people. So there's lots of choices. The vocal or the VoiceKeeper one works directly with a couple of different systems. The PRC Saltillo company, you don't have to pay to use that voice. It's a completely free service. So you can record it on your phone or your iPad. You can then import it. They'll send you an email, and you'd have access to that voice right away.
And if you go in the App Store and pull up VoiceKeeper, it is free to download and free to make a voice. So even if you want to play with it first, definitely that's something that you can see. And right now I'm going for 300 sentences because we keep seeing, like, from going from 50 sentences to 100 to 200, it really sounds a lot more like us, or how we sound when other people hear us, not like we sound in our heads.
I often recommend to my clients who are non-speaking that maybe they find a friend or a distant enough relative that it doesn't sound like your favorite cousin Caleb, but find someone that's the similar age, similar size, that might have a similar pitch in their voice, have them record a voice, someone at school, someone maybe not in your class, to create that voice for you so that you have a unique voice that's just yours. A lot of my adults, though, have said, no, I've been using this voice out of a can for so long that this is how I identify, so this is who I am.
And we'll be around afterwards, too, if you have any more specific questions on that. But
Absolutely. We
these
love
are-
talking about this stuff.
We were talking about this stuff 2 hours before we started talking to you.
Yeah, we talk about it
guys.
at breakfast, that kind of stuff.
So you have to think also what physical changes might cause technology changes. So as people age or as there is progression of any type of disease, we have to think, is the fine motor access changing? Is gross motor changing? Could vision change? Could hearing change? And that all depends on what area of the brain might be affected. But it is important to be able to have a therapist or someone on your team who understands when these things change, what might be able to change within the existing device or system that you have, and what might require a new system to be purchased. And then to know what to write in the report so that whatever your funding source is will say, okay, we'll buy a new, possibly more expensive device.
It could very well be that just a few setting changes would make the efficiency remain. To avoid mishits, to add a key guard, there's things that we can change when fine motor changes. When gross motor changes, how are we going to move the device with our person? When vision changes, making the buttons bigger or making a higher contrast with the vision, or going to auditory scanning. So there's lots of things, and it's our jobs as an SLP and as an AT person to know what is in each of these silly boxes, to know what it can do. You don't have to know that, but it sure does help to touch it to know what each of the pieces of technology can do. So again, we're talking about future needs. With a condition that changes over time, you may need to evaluate and request a device which works now, right? Funding sources aren't saying, for someone with ALS or another progressive disease, they're not saying, well, we know you're not going to be able to do it later, so we're just going to spend $10,000 on an eye gaze device today. The funding source is going to say, but he can talk, so why is he getting a communication aid? So we have to talk about what we can do now, but we have to consider what progression may come. Devices are funded once every 5 to 7 years. Most technology this is the case. So you can get a new wheelchair after 5 to 7 years because of wear and tear or the need for new batteries or whatever the things are within the technology. And so you don't have to have the thing that's going to last a lifetime, but you want to pick a system that's going to remain the same over time, and you just get a new one with the upgraded software or the upgraded RAM, if you will. So we also have to remember that a lot of our people who use communication aids, they might be part-time AAC users. In the morning when they wake up and they're fresh, maybe they're good talkers and they get their words out. And as the day goes on and their body fatigues, they might then need technology in order to communicate. So we always want to take into account all of those different variables to know what system is going to be best for our friends.
So when accessing AAC, this is something we preach over and over again, is backing up whatever system you have. If you have a low-tech core board, make sure that you have it saved in the cloud. Make sure you have it saved on a computer. Make 15 copies of it. Just making sure that you always have that available. Even if you do have an electronic or dynamic display high-tech system, it's good to make sure you have a low-tech backup, maybe even just printing what's on the screen out onto a low-tech board in case something happens. My favorite thing is it's technology and it will break. It's not if or when, it's will. I've had everything from, I've gone into our tech department and my favorite was the guy who was like, did somebody stab this with a screwdriver? And all I could say was, maybe.
It's possible.
It's just these devices kids can get very frustrated with. I've had them thrown, I've had them dropped.
They don't swim very well.
I had someone who threw one into a pool.
They don't always like spit or drool or food or sneezes, so sometimes moisture can get in between the screen and mess it up. There's lots of things that happen, but what we want to do is maybe if you've got the $10,000 device, you have an iPad backup. Maybe if you've got an iPad, you've got some paper backups, or you use what's called a Pixie Pal, which is like a big Tupperware thing for pages that you can put your pages in to go to the beach or the pool. So then it can swim with you without getting ruined.
And you can actually get these big posters. We have a few different sources where you can get these from different companies that have language layouts. It could be something cool to put on a wall in the bedroom.
You might see these in playgrounds more recently. A lot of people are putting them on a playground so that kids, I don't know how that works though, because do you get on the swing and say go, and then you get off the swing and then you say more, and you get back on the swing and say go, and then you swing a little bit, and then you go back over here and you say, it doesn't work for me, but I'm just being silly.
That's all right. And my final note on this page, if you weren't being silly, I'd be worried. Is this rice thing? I've never seen it work. And if you do want to try it, just never use Israeli couscous. It fits right into all of the ports.
Wait, who's being silly now? Other low-tech options. So what you'll see, the Pixie Pal, the thing that I mentioned before, is that blue thing on the top. It seals down with a rubber ring, so you can put your pages of pictures in there. We talk a lot about if you're going to go swimming, you might take communication words or boards and laminate them and tape them onto a kickboard, so you've got them at the pool or in water therapy. On the bottom, the yes/no athletic wristbands, those are great for PT, where we might not have our system right there where we can get to it, but if the PT says, hey, we're stretching right now, how you feeling? Does it hurt? Yes. Can I keep going? No. Can I keep going now if I'm gentle? Yes. So we find a way to get the communication out with low tech and no tech options. If they don't take batteries, it's going to be a lot easier in some of these situations. But we ask that you still follow some of those color codes. If our action words are still green and our pronouns are still yellow, our describing words are either pink or blue, what you're going to find is there's consistency between the programs, and it might make it easier for us to share that information as we're communicating.
We made this little chart of mainstream AAC. It's interesting you see both of these company names are hyphenated. That's because PRC and Saltillo merged, and a while ago Tobii and Dynavox merged. So there has been a centralization in what's available. We do have their websites up here, as well as what devices they manufacture. PRC Saltillo, you'll see things like the Prio, Accent, the LAMP app, NewEye, NovaChat, Chat Fusion, Touch Chat. Whereas with Tobii Dynavox, you might see the Indie, the app Snap Plus Core First, the Tobii iSeries. I know, that sounds like a lot. That's where sometimes bringing in an SLP who is knowledgeable about AAC gives you access to a range of options, because if you get someone who's only familiar with one device, that's going to limit the options that are available in terms of access, as well as limit what might be the language systems that are available. So I put some advantages and disadvantages. This slide is in the handouts that we've uploaded. If those didn't get to you guys, we're happy to share that.
You can always get a hold of us if you need more information. One thing to notice, though, is that these are not the only companies that make communication aids. There are lots of people out there who think they have the next best sliced bread, and so you're going to find lots and lots of companies that make lots and lots of communication aids. One size does not fit all, so if something works for you, that's awesome. Just know that there are lots of choices. The big companies have been around the longest, and so if you are 3 years old and you get a system, that system that you choose, if it was around when you were 3, we hope that it's going to be there if you need it when you're older. If you're 5, if you're 10, 15, however old you may be, we want your system to still be there. I've had lots of clients who have chosen systems, and then the company makes a change, and their system goes down, and they have to start over at the age of 10 with something they've already been using for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, so they sometimes stop product support, which no me gusta.
No, that's a terrible challenge that we frown upon.
So here are some other mid-tech to high-tech options. I have all the links in there, as well as apps. Now, apps are something that pretty much anybody who has the wherewithal for it can go out and make an app. There are families who have designed apps that work very well for their individual child. These are some that have been made for a wider audience and have a lot of power to them. So now we're going to move on to prompting and communication. We aren't going to stay on this too long because I think learning about the communication aids themselves is important, but just knowing kind of what's there when we start on the intervention side. We want to start with less to more, so less prompting is ideal. And that can just be like when I'm having a conversation, I give a pause and that tells the other person, okay, it's your turn to talk right now. So just kind of giving that pause is a good one. I like that Rachel Madel, who put this together, starts with tempt and pause.
You dangle the bacon.
Dangle the bacon.
And then they say, I want bacon. One thing that's
Had a
very,
lot of
very
bacon for
important
breakfast.
to remember is the minute that we prompt our communication partner, we've taken their turn. So if we can pause and wait and give them a chance to create their message or tell us what they need, they can be autonomous and we're not overstepping in their communication. But the minute that we prompt them and say, well, did you want bacon? Do you want bacon? Did you want that? Do you want it? You don't want it. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to take it. Do you need it? I don't want it. Do you want it? They're going to get frustrated. They're not going to have their chance, and that the behaviors start to grow, the frustration, the sadness. It makes it a lot more work to communicate. That frustration is going to get them not to want to try as much.
And so when communicating with people who use AAC, it's important. I always say that when we get up, we talk about we're not experts in this. Because the people who communicate full-time using an AAC device are truly the experts. Because that is their day in, day out. That is their life. So I always let people know I'm familiar with your system, or I've worked with your system a lot, but I don't walk into the room and say, I am the expert. I want to give that user the chance to know that they're going to probably teach me something as well.
My clients show me all the time where buttons are because I forget. And then they laugh at me that I don't know things. And they're right. I don't use it every day, so I don't know what they know.
We need to understand that every communicator is different, so always ask first. Some people are okay if you finish their sentence. If they start out and they're like, okay, save me some effort here and finish off what I was saying. If you know I'm going to say, I want bacon, as soon as I get to I want buh, it's okay for you to finish my sentence, whereas others are saying, I want to complete my entire sentence. Speak directly to the person. This is something I practice a lot, and some of the therapists I've worked with have been like, wait a second, I feel like you weren't talking to me. No, I wasn't. I was talking to the user. So even if a parent or caregiver is present, address the person. It's like when you're working with a translator. You want to make sure you're talking to that person, even though this person over here might be translating you into a different language. Understand communication takes longer.
A lot longer.
When we talk, we're up at about 150 words per minute, and when we get excited, that expands. Communication device users, even who are proficient, sometimes are around 8 to 10 words a minute.
I think my friend Chris, who is kind of the poster child of AAC, he uses his big toe to talk. I think he said he's around 25 to 30 words a minute. He has been using a system that's very efficient for his entire life. I think he's going to be 50 soon. He's going to be 50. And he's very, very quick and can really talk fast. But he's not the norm. So we have to give our friends time to get their message out. And we have to just be good listeners. We can't be in a hurry.
Yeah, definitely think about having that backup available in case there's a snafu. Also, backups are really great to model on so that you're not touching someone's voice or their device. And also thinking, how do you communicate with, well, we put up clients here because of who we typically work with, but how do you communicate with your verbal children or others who are verbal in your environment? It's not much of a change, though it can be a lot more kind of wait time.
This is my Sox fan. He was really excited to post on Facebook that he had taken me to my first game, which wasn't true. He's making things up. But, you know, the big thing is he has his voice. He's telling me what he wants to say. He invited me to the ball game, so his parents put me in the van and we all went to the game. The importance is opportunity and access. So by giving our friends the ability to communicate what they want to communicate, whether it be about their favorite show or that thing that the kids are doing, or I don't know, I'm too old for half of that stuff. That's what's important. Mm-hmm. The motivation and quality of life and enjoying every day with our friends and being a part of a community. Chris is the co-chair with me for the USAC membership committee, and I called him the lieutenant once, and he's like, well, I am in charge of membership committee too. And I went, okay, I guess you are. he's a part of something. So we want to make sure that our friends are also a part of things that are important to them.
So here we go.
That's Sayred's 4-year-old. He's bigger than that now.
I don't know why my husband put him in a bucket, but he's going to be in my presentations forever now.
Yeah.
You can contact both of us at these emails. You see, we both put hyphens in our last names. Mine, because I figured saying, hi, my name is Sayred Ruchinski, I'm your speech therapist, is a little bit of, so I'm sticking
It's a challenge.
with Bass.
I had to stick with speaker for speech therapy just because that's an amazing maiden name to have.
So we are available for any questions. We're happy to share any materials we have. Just even if you just have a random question, we are usually happy to answer that.
Do you have questions? Mm-hmm. Sure, go ahead. Yes, for those on Zoom, I'm going to repeat the question. She said her son with CTX often just chooses not to speak, even though he has the ability to speak, and he uses his home signals or his gestures and his signals of yes, no to get his needs met. And what I've found is every single one of my clients has a home signal system. The boy who uses the Apple Pencil on his head, he looks at his mother and she says, "Oh, you want me to tell Miss Beth what you did yesterday with your cousin Caleb with the computer and the camera?" I went, "How did you get that from him staring at your face?" They know things. They're sharing the thoughts. What you can do is find the moments of time when that is appropriate. I know what you're saying, but Grandma doesn't understand that, so let's say it again for Grandma. How can you tell Grandma what it is? Having a system where you balance. Again, it has to be motivation driven, but expressing that I need more information because I can ask you 20 questions, but it'll take us a lot longer. It's a tough place to be, but if you have a system for when we have all the time in the world and all the motivation in the world, and we use my home signals of I stare at you in the face and I'm talking about Caleb and the camera, and then anything in between, whether it be gestures. Chris, the boy who took me to the ball game, has a series of signs, even though he doesn't sign very well. We've got Dad, Mom, eat, drink, and I've known him for at least 7 years. I didn't know any of those signs until last week. And so finding the balance. Did I answer that question at all? Anytime. Any other questions? Do any of you guys, do you have experience with communication aids? Things that you've tried, things that you've seen, yeah? Do you mind? Go ahead, let us hear ya.
They tried to use the speak to talk with her. She threw it across the room. They did the pictures. She'll point to certain things, but
so your daughter, you say, or your granddaughter?
My granddaughter.
Your granddaughter has autism. So what we find again is we have to find that motivating thing. She's not going to want to talk about circle time because Thursday is not important to me. But if we find that snack or that thing or that spinning activity or that sensory thing, a lot of times we bring the motivation up higher and it doesn't start feeling like work. I have a lot of success with my clients with autism because I'm ridiculous and they want me to do the ridiculous thing. So once we get buy-in with the ridiculous and the fun, we can move it into more complex language. Don't give up on your granddaughter. She's going to get there. There's a lot of language to be there.
Oh, she's very smart. She can tell you what she wants, but she's still nonverbal. So.
I promise you, smartest in the room. She's got us all beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a matter, again, of finding the motivation and finding what it is that we want to say. So when we're talking about all these fancy computers, we're really just trying to find the words that we can use the most in order to create messages that help us to participate in our lives, to help us to make choices if we need them. The main things that we do with communication are requesting, I want bacon, directing, go get the bacon. Questioning, where is the bacon? Commenting, bacon is good. And protesting, I don't want that fancy bacon, I want the regular bacon, right? And so, horrible example, but those are the 5 main reasons that we use language. And if we can't do that with the systems that we have, then we've chosen the wrong system. So all of the other stuff doesn't matter if you can't participate in the activities that you're a part of. If you're at the family reunion and nobody knows what you're saying, then you're sitting off on the side, not communicating. So we really just want to make sure that access and opportunity are the things that you take away from this, to know that as long as we put language in front of our friends and find a system that might work and keep the motivation high, then we'll have, some great talks, if you will. Okay, any other questions? Any other comments? The young man in the front row, yes, sir.
Hey, so my question is, my son is 6. He was diagnosed when he was 3. He's got very bad cortical visual impairment, and he doesn't have the fine motor skills. So it's always been overwhelming for us to try to figure out a way that he can communicate better, because my wife and I are the only ones that can understand what he says sometimes.
Right.
So I was just wondering, are there any devices or what we should be looking at that could help him communicate a little better?
So in finding a system that has auditory scanning, so he can scan through his choices, there's a program called Core Scanner that I use with a couple of my clients with cortical visual impairment. They both also have cerebral palsy, so their motor challenges are there. Ryan had I don't know what level of stroke when he was a neonate, but he does not use the right side of his body. So he has a hand switch to his left hand, and he has a secondary switch to his temple. So he chooses or moves through his choices and hits it with his head. So if you can think of 1 or 2 movements that your son can do, finding a scan pattern or a system that can go through some choices for him. It can be as simple or as complex as 4 messages that you scan through 4 choices, or Core Scanner has 84 buttons and you can have all the language in the world. My friend Ryan likes to go through at least 75 different songs that he likes to sing. So he goes to his song page, tells me what song I have to sing, and usually it's VeggieTales or Bear in the Big Blue House. And so by finding, again, the motivation and finding a system where if he has one movement that he can repeat without too much effort, he can go through a scanning system to find that more complex thing to say. And if you want to reach out, I can, wherever you live with that accent, I can find you and we'll work it out.
Yes, we're in rural Georgia, so
Georgia.
It is hard to find anybody that can help us.
I got you.
So I'll definitely be reaching out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll figure some out. I got lots of great ideas, and Sarah and I love this kind of stuff. We do this day in and day out.
We're actually talking about Core Scanner.
We were at brunch this morning talking about Core Scanner. So this is just what we do when we're having fun. So yeah, happy to help. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you guys so much for coming. It was really exciting. If you see us out and about and you'd like to stop us and ask us a different question, if you want to reach out to our email, if you just want to poke us on Facebook and say, hey, I saw you at the thing, we love talking about this stuff and are always happy to help. You might consider joining USAC, which is the United States Society of AAC. There are all kinds of people all over the world who are using AAC, and it might help you to find someone else similar to you who communicates the same way. Max is just saying I have a question. He's just too cute, but he's 4 now. He's big. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks so much.